Greetings everyone. I will describe my theory on the lost city of Atlantis. This legend has been ingrained in our culture as a myth through many stories and movies. The origin of this myth is described by Plato, and in turn this was described to him by those that came before him, such as Solon. He describes this in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. Some believe that Plato simply made up this story as a part of his argument. However, Plato was quite serious as a philosopher and intellectual. He was really not someone who would just make things up. For the Greeks, both Atlantis and Troy were very real places. They were not simply made up stories. For this reason, there are very good arguments to believe that Atlantis really existed and that we could still find it today. Many people have speculated about the place. However, nowadays with satellite images, we can be quite sure exactly where it was. And the most likely location we can find is the Eye of Africa, the Richat structure in Mauritania. Now for some people this might seem a bit strange, as it is found in the Sahara Desert. However, we have to go back in history a bit and understand that this location looked very different many thousands of years ago. Plato describes Atlantis as an island. However, he uses the word Nessos, and this could also refer to a peninsula. He describes Atlantis as being found near the Atlantic. Now north of Mauritania we have the Atlas Mountains, and also the first king of Mauritania was named King Atlas. The mythology is that the god of the sea, Poseidon, had 10 children, and these were 5 pairs of twins. In the same manner, Atlantis is described as being a kingdom made out of 10 different smaller kingdoms. Therefore, Atlantis is not just one place, but rather a more wide-reaching empire. However, Plato describes the capital city of Atlantis, the central city, in a very specific way, even with specific measurements. Plato describes Atlantis being on the other side of the Pillars of Heracles. The Pillars of Heracles would be the Straits of Gibraltar. In older times there might have been lighthouses on both sides of the strait, or 2 huge bronze statues. Mauritania fits with this description, as in order to sail to Mauritania from Greece, from the Mediterranean, you would have to cross the Straits of Gibraltar. Atlantis was described as a kingdom with many different nationalities. It was kind of an international community. And obviously they had some contact with the Greeks through these stories. Mauritania is almost found in the Mediterranean, and they would surely have traded and waged war by the sea through the Mediterranean. Another story is that the Egyptians actually came from Atlantis after it sank below the sea. Egyptians are described as traveling through Africa to Egypt and finding the Nile River. So again, it makes a lot of sense that they would have traveled from Mauritania to Egypt. He describes the city in the shape of a ring, and the ring had 3 rings of water and 2 rings of land, and then the central citadel piece in the middle. He describes that the city was between 2 huge plains, and we see this with the Richat structure. The Richat structure is on this little peninsula of mountains between 2 big deserts, 2 big plains. He also describes that the opening to the sea was to the south. We can also see this on satellite images, and we can actually see trails of water erosion. It becomes very clear that there used to be water in this area. We can see the old rivers here from satellite. He also describes that the city was shielded by mountains to the north. This also fits with the Richat structure, and he described that there used to be 3 rivers flowing down from the mountains. You can also see the traces of these on the satellite image. Furthermore, Atlantis is described as a city that used to use a lot of metals such as iron, copper and gold. It's not so far north of the Richat structure, where we have one of the biggest iron mines in the world, if not the biggest. And they still mine iron from this mine to this day. Another description are red, white and black rocks in the area. This is also something we can see around the Richat structure. There's a description of elephants living in the area, and indeed elephants are native to Mauritania. Looking at the geology of the area, we can see that the rings of the Richat structure are made from very special sediments that are not found anywhere else in the area. We also find a lot of salt everywhere in the Richat structure, and even the water found below is salt water. There are also clams, whale bones and other such artifacts which would indicate that this area used to be below seawater. It can be discussed exactly when Atlantis was, but this should have been about 9600 BC. However, we know that at this point in time, this part of Africa used to be quite green, and there were rivers and lakes flowing through Africa. And looking at these geological maps, we can see that there used to be a lake exactly at the Richat structure. We can also see that there used to be a big river flowing from the sea into the Richat structure. This would have been the opening to Atlantis and the city. The river went from the west coast of Mauritania into land, and you have the south opening into the city. We also have some rock paintings from this area, which would indicate that there was much more life in these older times. People from the area have found many Neolithic tools, such as arrowheads, and these have been dated to about 10,000 BC and around that with a few thousand years increments. There was a clay pot or cup found that was dated a few thousand years back, and that pot could actually be traced to Central America. So this would indicate that there was transatlantic trade going on between Central America and Mauritania many thousands of years ago. So this would indicate that Mauritania had a seafaring nation at this point. And we also know that later on the Egyptians used tobacco and also cocaine that came from Central America. We can also find some old maps that actually name this place Atlantis. The oldest map would be the one from Herodotus of about 450 BC. Herodotus is known as the father of history, and he was one of the first Greeks and people in the West who started to record history and make maps. If we look at his map, we can see that he actually names this place in Mauritania Atlantis. We can also see this in some other maps, such as the Carte Pomponius, which names this region Atlantea. We have the Atlantic Ocean. This place is named Atlantis. We have the Atlas Mountains, King Atlas. And we have all these other dozens points of evidence, which would point to that this really is the place. Even the CIA conducted a study of the geomagnetic fields of this area. These documents have been declassified and released. However, it was only the methods of the investigation which was declassified. We can see that the actual results of this investigation has been redacted. It is not found. It's quite curious why this is. It makes sense that such an important city as Atlantis would have a very special geomagnetic configuration. According to the story in Plato's dialogues, the city of Atlantis prospered, but they become arrogant and they tried to conquer other nations. The Athenians fought back against the Atlanteans, and then because of their arrogance, Atlantis was punished by the gods and they were sank down beneath the sea. Some people like Radal Carson have noted that the Richat structure is about 200 meters above sea level, and for this reason he thinks that this is not Atlantis. However, if we look at this picture, which is a schematic of the underground beneath the Richat structure, we see that there is a lot of flexibility through the magma beneath, which could make the city rise and fall down quite a lot. Also the influx of water into the African continent and would have changed the elevation of the land. So even just from the satellite images we can see quite clearly that this area was flooded at some point, and then the water outflow went to the south, and there still is some mud there today. No one has yet made a serious archaeological excavation of this area. There has only been a few people looking around there, and they have not really found so much. However, we should understand that if there are any remains, they have to be quite deep beneath all the sand and dirt. However, when it comes to heavy metals and metals such as gold, they should not really have went far even with the water outflow. So this means they should still be very close or inside the Richat structure. If we find an area of water outflow in the mud, there we should find some potential artifacts and clay pots and such things. It is therefore my intention to travel to this place, and I will use a geomagnetic sensor to find any potential metal objects in the ground and dig for them. This is not gonna be a large-scale excavation, but even finding just one artifact and dating it would prove to the world that this really was the place of Atlantis. This would be revolutionary and change our perspective on history completely. I am currently traveling down to Africa. It will maybe take me another 2 months to reach Mauritania. I have always had a personal connection with Atlantis, and I have had many visions and dreams of this underwater city. I very strongly believe it is my calling to do this, and I do not think that I am delusional or crazy. This is not just a hunch from my side, but there actually is a lot of evidence to suggest that this really is the place. I therefore want to be a pioneer, to go there and find artifacts and prove this to the world. However, it will be difficult to do this alone, so I hope I can get some help from like-minded people and those who have a genuine interest, remains of Atlantis, and to expand the consciousness of mankind and our limited perspective on history. Therefore, I will start to make more serious content about this on YouTube and social media, and I will record my findings and my journey to this place. I will also set up a Patreon page where people can donate to fund this expedition. Currently, I have the funds and the means to travel to this place. However, to make a more serious excavation and to get a geomagnetic sensor or other kinds of sensors needed, I would need some more funds. And of course, I am very open to collaborating with any people who want to join me. I have spoken to some archaeologists who have visited this place, and I also know a group of people who will travel there in January. Hopefully I will be able to collaborate with these people, and hopefully I will receive the much needed funds and help from the people who are interested in following my journey. I will continue to make updates and more serious videos. Hopefully I can have live chats, Q&As, and just general vlogs about this journey. I might continue to put out these videos on this channel, or I will make a new one which is only focused on this particular expedition. Again, I'm not just some crazy guy who's doing this for fun, but I'm quite serious about this, and we could seriously make some very important findings in this area, because no one else has done it before. Feel free to come with any comments, any advice or help. Feel free to share this video around, and I will keep you guys updated. Okay, bye.